This is HB Vibes, your home for shocking and emotional war stories. Hit like, smash that subscribe, and let's dive into the drama. Jaden's stomach ached with hunger, but when he saw the old couple counting their last coins at the diner, he pushed his own meal toward them. He never imagined that a single act of kindness would bring a millionaire to his door the very next day. The neighborhood where Jaden lived was quiet in the mornings but heavy with the kind of silence that spoke of struggle. Cracked sidewalks wound through blocks of aging brick buildings, where children often played with second-hand toys and neighbors greeted each other with tired smiles. Jaden, a thin teenager with hopeful eyes that carried more weight than they should, woke up before the sun. He was used to it. Early mornings meant he could help his mother before heading off to school. The family's apartment was small, no bigger than a couple of diner booths, but it was filled with love. Jaden's mother, a nurse's aide, worked long hours at the local clinic. His little sister, Amira, was only 8, full of questions and boundless energy. Ever since their father passed away 3 years ago, Jaden had stepped into the role of protector and provider, even though he was still just a boy himself. Breakfast that morning was simple, half a piece of toast and some weak tea. Jaden quietly slid the bigger piece of toast onto Amira's plate when their mother wasn't looking. He had become good at hiding his sacrifices. Hunger was something he could handle. The thought of his little sister's stomach growling in class was harder to bear. At school, Jaden focused as best he could, though the gnawing in his stomach made it difficult. He was bright, always at the top of his class, but hunger had a way of dulling even the sharpest minds. Teachers often noticed his quiet determination but rarely the rumbling behind it. After school, Jaden worked odd jobs, carrying groceries for neighbors, sweeping up in the corner store, and sometimes helping at the local mechanic shop. Each dollar mattered. Most days, he saved every cent to help his mother with rent and groceries. But that evening was different. That evening, after weeks of tucking away coins in a jar, Jaden had enough money to buy himself a real meal. His feet carried him to the diner on Main Street, a place he often passed but rarely entered. The neon sign buzzed in the window, the smell of burgers and fries drifting into the night air. He hesitated at the door, patting the worn wallet in his pocket. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. Red leather booths lined the walls, chrome stools shone under bright globe lights, and the sound of sizzling from the kitchen mingled with chatter and laughter. Jaden slid onto a stool at the counter. For once, he allowed himself to feel like a normal teenager. He ordered a burger, fries, and a soda, simple, but to him it was a feast. When the plate finally landed in front of him, the sight alone was enough to make his mouth water. He picked up the burger, hands trembling slightly, and prepared to take the first bite. Then, he noticed them. At the far end of the counter, an elderly couple stood close together, their hands intertwined. The man had a proud but weary posture, his gray suit jacket worn at the elbows. The woman, with gentle eyes and silver hair neatly pinned, held her purse tightly against her chest. They whispered to each other, their voices barely audible over the hum of the diner. Jaden's gaze dropped to the counter in front of them. A few coins lay scattered, not nearly enough for a meal. The man's face tightened with embarrassment as he counted them again, and the woman gave a soft, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Jaden froze. His hunger screamed at him to stay seated, to take the first bite he had been waiting for all day. But his heart pulled him in another direction. He knew the look of empty stomachs, the quiet shame of not having enough. It was a look he had seen in his own mother's face too many times. Slowly, Jaden set down his burger. He looked at the couple again, his chest tightening. His meal wasn't much, but to them, it could mean everything. The choice before him was unfair, almost cruel. But Jaden already knew what he was going to do. He took a deep breath, stood up, and picked up his tray. Jaden's sneakers made a soft squeak against the diner floor as he carried the tray down the counter. His heart pounded, but his face remained calm, almost determined. The elderly couple looked up in surprise when his shadow fell across them. "Excuse me," Jaden said softly, setting the tray down in front of them. His voice wavered, but he steadied it. "This is for you." The man blinked behind his glasses, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Son, you must be mistaken. That's your dinner." Jaden shook his head, forcing a small smile. "I can eat later. Please, take it. You both look like you need it more than I do." The woman's eyes welled with tears. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the tray but stopped, hesitant. "We couldn't possibly. You're just a boy. You should eat." But Jaden gently pushed the tray closer, as if the weight of his decision had already been lifted. My mom always says, when you have enough to share, you should. Tonight, this is enough. The silence in the diner deepened. A fork clinked against a plate from a nearby booth, but otherwise people just watched. The waitress by the coffee machine paused mid-pour, her eyes softening. The man behind the counter, a stern-faced cook, leaned forward slightly as if trying to get a better look at what was unfolding. Finally, the old man reached out, his voice thick with emotion. "Young man, you don't know what this means to us." Jaden shrugged, though inside, his hunger twisted like a knife. "It's okay, really." The woman's lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." With careful hands, she lifted the burger as though it were a priceless gift. The old man wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and together they began to eat, slowly, gratefully, each bite carrying the weight of dignity restored. Jaden turned to walk away, but not before he caught the flicker of tears in the man's tired eyes. For a moment, his own stomach protested, reminding him of what he had lost. Yet there was a warmth in his chest, something deeper than food could ever satisfy. As he moved toward the door, murmurs spread across the diner. "Did you see that?" someone whispered from a booth. "Kids like him, rare these days," another muttered. A few people reached into their pockets as if considering paying for him, but by the time they thought of it, Jaden had already pushed open the door. The cool night air met him, and he stepped outside, pulling his hoodie tighter around his thin frame. His stomach growled loudly, but he ignored it. Walking home, Jaden kept replaying the moment in his head. The look of relief on the couple's faces. The way the diner went still, as if the world itself had paused to acknowledge what had happened. His hunger was sharp, but his spirit felt strangely full. When he arrived back at the apartment, Amira was already asleep on the couch, her small body curled beneath a blanket. His mother looked up from a pile of paperwork, her face etched with exhaustion. "You didn't eat?" she asked, noticing the absence of any food bag in his hand. Jaden smiled faintly and shook his head. "Not hungry tonight." She didn't press him. She was too tired to argue, but she studied him for a moment, a hint of knowing in her eyes. Jaden slipped into his small bedroom, lay down on his worn mattress, and closed his eyes. His stomach ached, but his heart carried the memory of an old couple who would sleep with full bellies because of him. And as the night deepened, Jaden had no idea that his simple act of sacrifice had been witnessed by someone who would soon change his life forever. The next morning, Jaden woke up with a hollow ache in his stomach. The sacrifice from the night before had left him running on empty, but he pushed the hunger aside. It wasn't the first time he had gone without food, and it probably wouldn't be the last. The apartment was buzzing with the usual routine, his mother preparing for another long day at the clinic, Amira rushing around, searching for her missing homework sheet. Jaden tied his shoelaces and checked his school bag, trying to ignore the gnawing pain inside. Then came a knock. It was soft at first, but firm enough to echo through their small living space. His mother paused, frowning. Who could that be this early? Jaden went to the door. When he opened it, his eyes widened. Standing on the doorstep was the old man from the diner. His glasses shone in the morning light, and instead of the worn coat from last night, he wore a tailored suit, neat and polished. Behind him, parked by the curb, was a sleek black car that looked like it belonged in a different world entirely. "Good morning," the man said with a kind smile. "You must be Jaden." Jaden blinked. "Yes, sir. But, what are you doing here?" The man adjusted his glasses. "My name is Richard Thompson. My wife and I, we never forgot what you did for us last night." His voice carried a depth that Jaden hadn't noticed before, as though it belonged to someone who had lived many lives. "I would like to come in and speak with you and your family, if I may." Jaden hesitated, but his mother stepped forward, curious. She invited the man in, and soon Richard Thompson was sitting in their modest living room, his polished shoes looking oddly out of place against the frayed carpet. "I need to be honest with you," Richard began. "I am not the man you thought you met last night. My wife and I were not poor travelers who had run out of money. I am, well, I suppose you could say I am a retired businessman." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some would call me a millionaire." Jaden's mouth fell open, his mother's eyes widened, but she said nothing, her face a mix of suspicion and disbelief. Richard leaned forward. "I spend much of my time now trying to understand people. True character, real kindness, it's harder to find these days than you might think. So, from time to time, I place myself in situations where I can see the truth of how people treat others. Last night, you passed a test you didn't even know existed." Jaden's pulse quickened, his sacrifice, his hunger, the quiet pride he carried, it had all been witnessed. Richard smiled warmly. I came here today because I want to know more about you. I believe you have a heart that deserves to be nurtured. Jaden sat frozen, still trying to grasp the words. A millionaire, a test. It sounded like something from a movie, not his real life. His mother leaned forward cautiously. Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, why us? Why my son? Richard turned his gaze to Jaden. Because your son gave when he had nothing to spare. He didn't do it for recognition. He didn't do it because anyone was watching. He did it because kindness is who he is. That kind of spirit, it's rare. And when I see it, I want to support it. Jaden's face flushed. He didn't feel like a hero. He had simply done what his heart told him to do. But the sincerity in Richard's eyes told him this was no trick. Jaden, Richard continued, I grew up poor. I know what hunger feels like. I know the shame of not having enough. When I became successful, I promised myself I'd never forget those days. And when I meet someone like you, someone who reminds me of the boy I once was, I see an opportunity. An opportunity to give back in the way I wish someone had for me. Jaden's mother clasped her hands together, overcome with emotion. Sir, we don't want handouts. Richard raised a hand gently. This isn't charity, think of it as an investment. I want to help your son pursue his dreams. I want to help your family find stability. And I want Jaden to understand that kindness is never wasted, it always comes back, sometimes in ways we can't imagine. Tears pricked Jaden's eyes. For so long, life had been about surviving day by day. Now, for the first time, the possibility of something greater flickered before him. A week later, Jaden and his family visited the Thompsons' home. The mansion was unlike anything Jaden had ever seen. Polished floors, wide hallways filled with paintings, and a dining room table that could seat 20. That night, they shared a meal that Jaden would never forget. Plates of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and desserts he could barely name. Amira laughed with delight, crumbs on her cheeks, while their mother kept wiping tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude. After dinner, Richard pulled Jaden aside. I want to sponsor your education, he said. Tutors, books, even college when the time comes. And your mother, I know people at the hospital who can help her find stable, better paying work. Your sister, too, I'll ensure she has every resource to thrive. Jaden felt lightheaded. Why me? He asked again. Richard smiled. Because you proved that even when the world gave you little, you chose to give. That's the kind of person who deserves every chance to succeed. That night, lying in a bed softer than he'd ever known, Jaden whispered a prayer of thanks. His future, once clouded in uncertainty, now shimmered with possibility. With Richard's support, Jaden's life began to change. He moved into advanced classes, had access to resources he had only dreamed of, and began to see himself not as a boy trapped by circumstances but as a young man with potential. Yet not everyone celebrated his success. Some classmates whispered behind his back. Charity case, they sneered. Others accused him of getting special treatment he didn't deserve. The words stung, but Jaden held his head high. He remembered what his mother always told him. Character is proven when no one is clapping. One day, he learned of a classmate struggling to afford books. Jaden knew the feeling all too well. Without hesitation, he used part of his scholarship stipend to help. When the boy protested, Jaden smiled. You'd do the same for someone else one day. When Richard heard about it, his eyes glistened with pride. I was right about you, he said. Kindness isn't a moment for you, it's who you are. Years passed, and Jaden grew into a young man of purpose. On graduation day, he walked across the stage in his cap and gown, his family cheering loudly. The Thompsons sat beside them, like proud grandparents. Jaden had earned honors, along with a scholarship to study medicine. As he shook hands and accepted his diploma, he thought of the path that had led him there, the hunger, the sacrifice, the knock on the door. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Jaden found himself outside a diner, holding a tray of food. Through the window, he saw a boy standing on the sidewalk, his face pressed against the glass, hunger written all over him. Jaden stepped outside and held out the tray. Here, he said with a warm smile. This is for you. The boy's eyes widened with gratitude, just as Jaden's had so many years ago. And in that moment, Jaden understood. Kindness had carried him forward, and now it was his turn to pass it on. Because true wealth was never about money, it was about the ability to give, even when it cost something. If you felt the heartbeat of this story, give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to HB Vibes, where every story carries a lesson for the soul.